The empowering news is we can all make a difference. When you or I do something good, when we advance spiritually, we're not only helping ourselves or whoever we've been of service to, but we're actually helping the whole world as well. The whole of humanity makes that tiny step forward because of the good we've done. There will come a time on this earth, it seems rather distant at the moment, but there will come a time when we really do achieve the dream of world peace, where we live together in harmony and we are completely focused on harmony with the planet, on collective enlightenment, and eventually advance even to the point where we've solved our problems here and we'll actually be looking to help other races on other planets solve their problems, much in the same way that we are currently being helped now.
My guest today is Mark Bennett, who is an accomplished author and international director of the Aetherius Society, a global spiritual organization. He co-authored Prayer Energy and God's Guides and Guardian Angels with international best-selling author Richard Lawrence. The latter was voted Best Book on Spirituality 2007 by Kindred Spirit readers. His works have been translated into multiple languages, reflecting their global impact. A Cambridge graduate in Chinese, Mark embraced the teachings of King Yoga early in life. He regularly shares spiritual insights through lectures, radio interviews, and TV appearances, including BBC's The Big Questions. Mark, welcome to the Transcendent Minds Podcast.
Thank you, Peter. Great to be here.
Let's talk about the origins and founder to start with. The Aetherius Society, founded by Dr. George King, presents itself as a unique spiritual path that blends elements from various traditions such as Christianity and Eastern mysticism and New Age spirituality. Dr. King has been described, as far as I can glean, as a Western master of yoga who established this organization based on communications with extraterrestrial beings referred to as gods from space. Can you tell us more about Dr. George King's background and how he came to establish the Aetherius Society?
Yes, everything you've said there is absolutely correct about the early origins of the Aetherius Society. Around the end of the Second World War, Dr. King decided to completely devote his life to the practice of the advanced forms of yoga. So it's not just yoga for health and fitness, though he may well have done that too. It's more advanced forms of yoga, such as mantra yoga, Raja yoga, Kundalini yoga, which are designed to raise consciousness in a major way. Along the way, the practitioner will also gain psychic abilities. He was living in London and did various jobs to earn money. But when he wasn't working, he would practice yoga sometimes 8 to 10 hours a day, that kind of commitment on top of doing a day's work. So he was completely dedicated to the pursuit of enlightenment through yoga. And he attained various meditative states and developed certain psychic abilities. Then on May the 8th, 1954, he had a contact with a being from another planet who spoke to him. He couldn't see the intelligence, and he was only drying dishes at the time. He wasn't in a meditative state. He wasn't expecting anything particular to happen at that moment, but he heard this voice outside of himself saying, "Prepare yourself, you are to become the voice of interplanetary parliament." He didn't know quite what that meant, and it was some days before he was actually introduced in a more explanatory way to what this meant. That was with another contact with a spiritual master who was alive on Earth at that time.
In terms of evidence, because people will be listening to this and thinking, okay, so what evidence can you provide to support the claim that Dr. King communicated with extraterrestrial beings?
Yeah, the greatest evidence of all is in the quality of the teachings given. And if you study the teachings, if you practice the teachings, they really are, I was going to say out of this world, but they are literally out of this world, and they are the best thing in the world that is freely available to anyone, certainly with an internet connection who knows English, but available in a very accessible way. You don't have to climb a mountain in the Himalayas and camp out for 10 years before you're initiated into one mantra, for example, as may have been the case in times gone by. These teachings and practices are given in a very easy way. The teachings, they're as easy to understand as they possibly could be. Let's put it like that. But at the same time, we are talking about the most profound truths available on earth. To really understand them obviously does take some work, but that's because they are quite literally the meaning of life. They're the key to personal enlightenment and global salvation, saving humanity from itself, really, because we veer from one crisis to the next. In fact, we have several crises going on at the same time, don't we? I don't even know how many wars are going on Earth today, but it's certainly more than one, it's certainly more than two. We have so-called natural disasters, we have the threat of nuclear war, or even a nuclear accident. There are these various things, either catastrophes unfolding at present or potential catastrophes. The teachings given by the gods from space, also known as the cosmic masters, are specifically designed to help us put our planet in order. They're not for our philosophical entertainment or just to make us cleverer or wiser in some kind of abstract way. They are the tools, the practical tools that we need to save Earth. The only way to really prove to yourself that these teachings are true is to try them out. Again, you don't need to live in a cave for 10 years to find out that they're true. Just a little bit of practice will reveal that something very real and very profound is taking place within you.
That's well said. In terms of the core beliefs and practices, from my research, I can see that the teachings of the Aetherius Society covers a broad range of metaphysical concepts, including life on other planets, the nature of God, and the purpose of human existence. And the emphasis, from what I can glean, is on selfless service and cooperation with extraterrestrial beings, and the use of spiritual techniques for both personal development and global healing. Can you elaborate on some of the key teachings of the Aetherius Society that set it apart from other spiritual paths?
Yes, let me think how to approach that. There's a big question because we like to, in many ways, celebrate what we have in common with other paths. We don't believe in being divisive, and we don't think that we're the one and only way, that we're right and everyone else is wrong. We don't think that at all. But there are certain things that are unique about the Aetherius Society's path of King Yoga, and uniquely practical and uniquely profound. But if I didn't think that, I'd be in a different religion. So I think the opportunity to actually cooperate with beings from another planet in a very real way is, to the best of my knowledge, completely unique for unascended people on this plane of this planet. So I'll give you an example of that, which I'm sure is not happening in any other organization, and that is Operation Prayer Power. We believe that spiritual energy is a real thing. It's not just a concept or a philosophy. It's an actual energy in the same way that electricity is an energy. They're very different types of energy, but they're equally real. And spiritual energy as such can be invoked and stored and released. So in Operation Prayer Power, the goal is to invoke this energy through prayer, mantra, and visualization, direct it through visualization into a spiritual power battery. And this contains certain material that will hold this energy. And then the battery can be released in a time of need. For example, if there was a big peace negotiation to end one of these terrible wars going on at the moment, a real key moment where the leaders of both sides were meeting together and expressed some kind of desire to create peace, that would be a very good strategic moment for us to release one of these batteries containing all this positive energy, so that it could be directed to inspire those people at this meeting. But the really amazing thing about this is when the energy is released, it's directed by the cosmic masters themselves. It's not just released into the ethers, as it were. It's actually directed in the most potent way possible by these great intelligences. So there you have ordinary people, and we are ordinary people in the Aetherius Society. We don't think that we're great adepts or masters or anything. We're ordinary people who gather together, usually every week, to invoke this energy, and it's a fantastic experience invoking this energy, by the way. You really can feel something going on in your aura, possibly in certain chakras as well. In fact, when I started, I was really quite surprised how strong the sensation was. I hadn't been expecting it. So it wasn't psychosomatic, because psychosomatic would mean that I was thinking, I should be feeling this. Can I feel this? Oh, yes, I can. You try to talk yourself into feeling it. It wasn't like that at all. I was feeling sensations that I'd never expected or hoped to feel at all. And especially when you have a key role where you're actually praying at the battery itself, rather than being in the mantra team around the battery, that's an even more intense experience. It's certainly the highlight of my week, I would say. That I do get a little bit nervous, to be honest, because it's a very important thing. But when you're actually there in the moment, it's just the absolute best thing ever, as far as I'm concerned. And you're expressing love in its highest sense, the highest sense that we're capable of expressing it as, in the knowledge that we have this amazing opportunity and privilege that our lowly energy is going to be used for good by these great beings from other worlds.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much for sending me those books. I've read it through. It's a beautiful book. It gives you a practical toolkit of understanding, as distinct from a rule book of behavior. I've actually left you reviews on Amazon for both books because I've just found them a valuable addition to my life and to my spiritual life, especially prayer energy, something I use daily now. There's a huge growing body of evidence to suggest that prayer and other similar spiritual practices have a significant effect on the brain, on the body, on the chakras. And even though the scientific focus tends to be on the mechanisms rather than the spiritual beliefs themselves, but the research in neuroscience suggests that prayer and meditation and contemplative practices, when people come together, there's an incredible connective fiber in the unseen aspects of things that becomes very powerful.
I think that's where it gets really interesting, because it's one thing to think of prayer as being like meditation, which will calm the mind and make us feel reassured, perhaps. You can imagine various benefits. But actually, when it's really put into practice properly, then it can be so much more even than that. It's not just about how you feel in your mind. It's about radiating a very real positive force out into the world that actually can help other people, can help to raise consciousness. And actually, every time somebody says an unselfish prayer, whatever their religion, they will be actually radiating a little bit, at least, of this energy. Maybe not very much. That depends how much effort they put in. The more effort we put in, the greater will be the result. In Prayer Energy, which you were kind enough to mention, the book, it does explain that prayer is actually a very simple, practical thing that can be learnt and practiced and improved, and that you can really feel the results of.
One of the key things on a physical level is that you're redirecting one's neuroplasticity through regular prayer or meditation. And that is rewiring the brain. And that consistency of prayer strengthens certain neural pathways, which I think is part and parcel of not only making it easier for individuals to access calm and focused states over time and all the other psychological benefits and physiological benefits of prayer, but in terms of the battery you mentioned, is that it has this distribution. It allows this huge distribution of energy because of this redirection in the neuroplasticity on a physical level. But on an ethereal level, that becomes a transmission, that becomes a beacon of transmission. That's something that hasn't really been looked at in depth from a scientific point of view. But I've been in situations where there is a gathering. It's like cognitive distribution, where you're distributing cognition, but this is like distributing and setting up an ever ready media or two-way traffic between the people who are gathered together, and the two-way traffic can start to happen because that ever ready media has been set up. The consistency then allows those transmissions to flow.
I think science hasn't even really begun to understand prayer, or even barely to take it seriously at all. And I'm sure that this is something that will change. It has to change because it's such an important thing. If everyone on earth said just 5 minutes of a prayer for world peace, coming from an unselfish place, whatever their religion or belief, whatever technique they use, just the desire alone and the sincere goodwill in their hearts, if everyone on earth did that for 5 minutes a day, it would be, I think, a very different world indeed, just radiating that kind of energy. You don't have to join the Aetherius Society. You don't even have to read that book. This is something innate. It's instinctive, actually, within us all to manifest this divine potential, this feeling of goodwill. And that is, in some ways, it's what it's all about. And it's certainly the first step towards cultivating that feeling of goodwill and making your energy output greater in the sense of more energy and also energy of a higher quality.
I had a guest who did a world tour and she went to Israel. She was on a kibbutz. Now, some of the people there hated the Arabs. She had a prayer circle, and this went on for a couple of weeks. And after 2 weeks, two of the people in that prayer circle said they no longer had hate in their heart. Through prayer, there was a letting go of hate, much like they were able to tune, like a radio station, they were able to tune into the frequency of their thoughts and emotions. During prayer, they were able to resonate with those energies that surrounded them, which allowed them to influence and align themselves with a different outcome. This idea shifts prayer from being a plea or a request to a dynamic exchange, where a force that we can harness to create change not only within but around us.
This is it. A prayer is not just asking God for a favor that he or she or whatever the person believes, this deity may or may not grant this favor based on how much he or she likes you or what mood they're in that particular day, or whether or not they've been to the right church or whatever it is, all these things. It's not about that. It can be a plea, but it's not a plea to a being like us that then grants favors. It's a plea, as it were, to the spirit of creation, the essence of the universe itself. And if you open your heart to wanting the best for this world, this energy will flow. It can't not flow, in fact. If your thoughts are basically moving in the right direction, in a positive way at that moment, Even if you may be a terrible sinner and the rest of your life, sinner in inverted commas, you may have made terrible mistakes in the rest of your life. But if your heart, if you really want something good and unselfish in that moment, this energy will flow through you and it will make a difference to people, even to people possibly who've never heard of spiritual energy. And if they did hear of it, they wouldn't believe in it. But it will help the world as a whole, consciousness to rise in humanity as a whole.
If we look at prayer as a focused energy, does the outcome depend on the strength of belief, or is it more about consistent, harmonious vibration, much like a tuning fork?
It's a question of the quantity and quality of the energy. So if you pray in a very dynamic way with your heart chakra uncovered, so I'll just demonstrate this actually. This is the way that we pray, and it's just for practical reasons so the energy can flow out of the chakras in each palm and the heart chakra, which is around here in front of the physical breastbone. You can pray, you could close your eyes, visualize the white light flowing through you, and then you could start praying in a very dynamic fashion, very definite, and that will tend to have a more quantity of energy, but the quality may not be quite so refined. To get the quality up, you'd need to raise your consciousness, to attune yourself to that frequency of energy. But one of the interesting things is that obviously the goal should be both quantity and quality. That's what a great master could do, could invoke a great deal of energy at a very high frequency very quickly. And we should, of course, be trying to get the quantity as great as we can and the quality as great as we can. But it's very interesting that actually, depending on what the goal is, the higher frequencies are sometimes too high to be used. I won't go into this at length because it gets very complicated. It's fascinating, but it's above my pay grade, I would say, to really understand this. But certain frequencies of energy, if, for example, the cosmic masters just sent the highest quality of energy that they could invoke to help us, we wouldn't be able to do a thing with it. It's possible it could even be harmful to us because it would just be too much for us to take. So different frequencies are needed for different things. But when we're praying, we're not really advanced enough to be able to exactly attune ourselves to the exact frequency that's needed. So we just do our best and say the prayer in the best way we possibly can. Every time we pray, it's not just about sending out the energy, it's also about karma. If we are radiating all this positivity, that will improve world karma. And that will enable the cosmic masters to help us more. The only reason that they don't land en masse, or let's say the main reason they don't land en masse today, is because our karma isn't good enough to deserve that. We are like the naughty children of the solar system, and they can help us. It's like you can help a naughty child. You can help your son or your daughter with their homework if they're having trouble, but you can't do the child's, or you shouldn't do the child's homework for them because then they won't learn anything. And likewise, if the cosmic masters solved all our problems for us, which they could, we wouldn't learn anything. And we'd actually end up going backward. So they help as much as they are allowed to, karmically. They do everything they possibly can for us. They do far more for us than we do for ourselves, which is an extraordinary thing, because there is nothing that they would not do within the divine karmic law to help us. They don't say, no, I've had enough of them. I'm taking a holiday. I'm fed up with them. I've lost faith in them. They don't deserve it. They don't have that attitude. They are completely selfless intelligences. So when we radiate positivity through prayer, when we radiate spiritual energy through prayer, it makes world karma better, which means they're allowed karmically to do more for us. So let's take a very optimistic scenario that we were radiating energy for world peace that was of such a high level that the people actually in the peace meeting couldn't access it. It was too high for them to use. I think in that kind of a scenario, it may well be that the cosmic masters would then send the exact kind of energy that was needed precisely to help these people come to the correct spiritual decision and bring about peace. Because the cosmic masters would be allowed to do that because we've taken that positive step, that positive action. And the more we do in the right direction, then the closer they can come to us and the more they can do for us.
It's interesting, karma originates from ancient times, Indian philosophies, notably Hinduism and Buddhism and Jainism, and represents the principle of cause and effect, where an individual's actions and intentions influence their future. And karma seems to have shaped perspectives on morality and ethics and rebirth for thousands of years. In your view, how has the concept, or through the lens of the Aetherius Society, how has the concept of karma evolved from its ancient roots to its modern interpretation?
That's a very interesting question. First of all, karma is literally as old as time itself, the law of karma. It's not something that mankind has invented. It's a very real force in the universe that applies to absolutely every living thing, which is everything, because the universe is alive. The teachings that we have about karma, first of all, sometimes it's not even called karma when it is karma. When it says in the Bible, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. That is a nice, simple, clear definition of karma that was presumably designed to appeal to the kind of people who were sowing seed in the fields and could easily understand such a thing. However, whether it's called karma or not, sometimes it is just horrendously misunderstood to the point where it's pretty much the exact opposite of what it's meant to be. For example, the idea if someone is suffering, you shouldn't help them because it's their karma to suffer and you'd be interfering with their karma. Now, the first thing you're doing there is making bad karma for yourself, because it's the very essence of karma is that we're meant to help others. And if somebody is suffering and we help them get through the suffering, then it must have been within their karmic pattern that help was allowable because we've just done it. So the whole thing is a wicked, selfish nonsense, people who talk like that. I've heard some terrible things. Don't want to dwell too much on the negative, but like blaming a woman if her husband dies, for example. I've heard that happens in one particular society because they think that it's the wife's bad karma has caused the death of the husband. I mean, it's complete nonsense and very cruel, because then this woman is punished. Grieving widow is punished as an outcast. So this is the absolute opposite of what our approach to karma should be. Putting it really simply, it's about the more good we do, the more opportunity we will have to do good. For example, if somebody in one life was a great philanthropist and gave a lot of money to charity, even to the point of just living in quite a simple fashion themselves, then possibly in their next life, they were born to even greater wealth. Now, there's one school of thought that would say, yes, you were born rich. That means your karma is wonderful. So therefore, sit back and enjoy it. It's not like that. What it is if someone is born rich because they've been generous in a previous incarnation, what that new incarnation is about the opportunity to do even more good. That's what it's about. It's not a sort of thank you present that you can then use to go off and buy 10 Ferraris and everything's fine. Well, you can go off and buy 10 Ferraris if you have the money, but you would be wasting a fantastic opportunity to do good. And to do good without even believing in God, never mind the Aetherius Society. You don't even have to be very bright to see that the money that you would spend on 10 Ferraris could save lives. This is not advanced moral philosophy. This is simple common decency. So whenever we do have something good in our lives, we could be happy that we have something good in our lives, certainly. And I'm not suggesting that we never enjoy ourselves in any way ever, like some awful Puritan. I'm not suggesting that at all. But basically, when we have a power, whether it's intelligence or money or status for some reason, these things are opportunities to do good. And they're wasted all the time, not invariably, but all too often. And all too often wasted without anyone even thinking that anything wrong is being done. But these things are real tragedies for the world that could benefit, but also for the individuals themselves, because wasting an opportunity is sowing bad karma for yourself. Wasting an opportunity to do good, I should say.
The concept of karma has gained a lot of popularity, but it's often simplified into the idea of cosmic justice. I hate to send you into cliches, but what goes around comes around.
I think it is cosmic justice, but it's not, that's true, but it's one way of looking at it. I think one important point to make is that karma cannot be true without reincarnation, because it's quite plain that some bad people don't get what they deserve and some good people don't get what they deserve in this life. We can see that quite easily. So the concept of karma only works when you regard, I would say, regard life as being eternal. You go from one life to the next, and the more good you do, the more you advance, you will have more opportunities to do good, and eventually master all the lessons you need to learn through reincarnation on this earth, and then you can be reborn onto a higher planetary cycle. So it's about justice, but it's also about learning. Actually, it was an interesting point that Dr. George King made about karma, was that if it was possible to wipe away all of someone's bad karma, they would be a completely useless person because they wouldn't learn anything. They wouldn't have the lessons they needed. The only person who can wipe away bad karma is you. Wipe your own bad karma away by doing good. We've all done bad things, and you can't just look at someone and say, he's clever, rich, and handsome, therefore he must have been a wonderful person in his last life. It's not as simple as that, because it's all about the lessons you need to learn to do more good, to be wiser. Sometimes people who are born with it all, as it were, that is not actually going to make them wise people. Whereas someone else could have a much more challenging life, but those are the exact lessons they need, and they make tremendous progress in that life so that in their next life they can do more good. This is what it's all about. It's not about rewards of comfort. Like, this is a very kind of human concept. It's about advancing towards God knowledge, towards wisdom, so that we can be more useful humans and eventually more useful even beyond this earth. When we have learned all the lessons there are to be learned on this earth, then we can begin a higher life cycle on another planet where there's still karma. There's always karma. But in that kind of highly evolved state, the individual would be constantly manipulating their karma for good. So they would be creating good karma for themselves all the time, not just for selfish reasons, because that would be pointless ultimately anyway, but so they can be more useful, so they can serve the whole solar system more, so they can serve the galaxy, and they will enjoy higher states of consciousness, certainly, which could be regarded as a reward too. But then they will apply the wisdom that they get from these higher states into their cosmic service. We're extremely fortunate that beings on other planets are like this. Let's just make one thing clear, actually. I'm not saying that all extraterrestrials are so advanced and so good, but the extraterrestrials in this solar system are both spiritually and technologically millions of years ahead of us. In fact, they're so far advanced that they actually live on different planes of existence. If NASA flew to Mars tomorrow, NASA would not find any trace of Martian civilization unless the beings on Mars chose to reveal it. Because the whole thing is at a higher level of vibration, just as there are beings on this earth who exist at a higher level of vibration, such as the ascended masters. They're either on this plane very much behind the scenes, or they're on a higher plane, or they may be doing a job or even on a lower plane. But either way, there are higher forms of life on this earth that we're not aware of. That is equally, if not even more true, on other planets, that these beings are so advanced that they're on another plane of existence. But it is still a physical plane. It's not some kind of vague, nebulous spirit world that doesn't really exist. To them, when they're on that plane, it's just as physical as this plane is to us. This is something that possibly quantum physics is just beginning to scratch the surface of. They would call it different dimensions. We'd call it different planes or frequencies or realms. And I think science may be just beginning to scratch the surface of this fascinating area, but it still is a long way from really uncovering this amazing truth. This is one reason why sometimes when people see UFOs, which are actually extraterrestrial spacecraft, they seem to flick in and out of existence, or at least visibility. This may be because they are moving through different planes of existence.
I think Einstein said that frequency was the medicine of the future.
If he did, that's a very interesting statement. He made quite a lot of interesting statements, actually, that are
Yeah.
towards the spiritual end. I think I'm right in saying it was Einstein who said something like, the most amazing thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. It may be an incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. And I think that's a fascinating thing because, yes, why do we have this faculty to understand the universe? And I think that little by little, of course, to understand the universe. And I think it boils down to the fact that we're all one, that everything is one, that everything is a spark of the divine creator. And this divine creator is within us and yet above all things and yet all things all at the same time, and is so much greater than this concept of a God that's a bit like us, with a long grey beard on a cloud, with favourites and prejudices and anger and vengeance and all sorts of things. These are human qualities that we have attributed to the Creator. I certainly feel myself that it's such a wonderful journey to try to take our understanding of God ever higher. Because it's not just enough to just say, oh, yes, God is the essence of all things, we're all one. That's good. But that's not the end. That's virtually the beginning, really, of what does that really mean? What are all the implications of that? To begin to realize God, to realize the divinity of all things, where it's a realization rather than just a belief. When it's a realization, it's something so much greater because it's built on understanding. It's something that's really rooted in the very depths of our consciousness and is something that is so much harder to shape because it lives within us.
In what ways do you think the concept of collective karma can be applied to understanding current global changes or
Good question.
challenges?
Collective karma is definitely a thing. We have individual karma, and countries have karma, and the whole world has karma. It's a massively important thing. It's absolutely key to understanding all of our problems on Earth, really. We cannot have a proper understanding of global crises without understanding. So what if one person does a lot of terrible things completely on the other side of the world? It affects us all to some degree. As I was saying earlier, one of the most important aspects of karma, of world karma, is how much allowance karmically these beings from other planets have to help us now. If person X and person Y were saints, but person A and person B were serial killers, person X and Y would not get the help because we are all one. We're just as much responsible in certain respects for someone living thousands of miles away who we've never met as we are for one of our friends. We are one planetary family in terms of collective karmic responsibility. The empowering news about that is we can all make a difference. So when you or I do something good, when we advance spiritually, we're not only helping ourselves or whoever we've been of service to, but we're actually helping the whole world as well. And the whole of humanity makes that tiny step forward because of the good that we've done. There will come a time on this earth, it seems rather distant at the moment, but there will come a time when we really do achieve the dream of world peace, where we live together in harmony and we are completely focused on harmony with the planet, on collective enlightenment, and eventually advance even to the point where we've solved our problems here and we'll actually be looking to help other races on other planets solve their problems, much in the same way that we are currently being helped now.
I've seen that in my dream. I hold on to that because I know it to be true. Maybe not in my lifetime, but if I can shape my agency so it has that ripple effect, moves the needle forward so that you pass the baton on, that's doing the holy work for me. That's job done.
You'll be coming back anyway. It doesn't end
No.
with death. Life goes on even after death, and we'll all come back. Unless we're so advanced that we manage to ascend. But even then, it's still another incarnation. It's not the end of existence. It's not eternal bliss in the sense of just lounging around on a cloud, eating grapes, listening to angels playing harps. Not that I think that would actually be very blissful. The more advanced people get, actually, on the contrary, the more active they are in helping others and even saving whole worlds. It's a very active, dynamic state that is balanced by certain periods that they will have of very deep meditation that is deeper than is physically possible for us now. Even if we were very saintly, it's just not physically possible for us as terrestrials, as mortal terrestrials, to achieve that kind of depth of realization. This is one of the exciting things about life, is that it goes on and on. We learn more, we appreciate more, we realize more about our own true nature, the nature of the cosmos, the nature of God. We learn more and more to the point where we can answer questions that now we couldn't even ask. We wouldn't even understand what the question was. And they're these great beings, they have these profound realizations that we too will one day enjoy.
You've appeared on the national TV to discuss spirituality. How do you approach making complex spiritual concepts accessible to a broad audience?
It's extremely difficult sometimes, but I try to take inspiration from the example of the cosmic masters, who always try to succeed in making everything as simple as they possibly can. There is no superfluous complexity whatsoever. I think it's a discipline trying to be clear and easy to understand and telling people things that are actually useful to them rather than just talking about what I'm interested in. But it can be a challenge because sometimes the people you're talking to, they don't really want to understand. They're not on a journey, or they don't think they're on a journey. I think everyone's on a journey, really, but they may be very hardcore atheists who are completely closed to any notion of spirituality at all. Now, people like that, that's their opinion. They have the right to that opinion. I can state my views, my experience, but I don't think there's much point in trying to persuade such a person, because they're not, strangely enough, although they may be a scientist, and scientists often are atheists, but not always, of course. It's actually a very unscientific approach to be closed-minded, of course. But I don't think there's any point in trying to persuade people who have already made their minds up. That's the point. But when someone's genuinely interested, open-minded, then it's a joy to be able to help such a person on their spiritual journey. They may never join the Aetherius Society, but I've given them perhaps a new point of view, a new perspective that adds something to their understanding of the universe. That's an extremely worthwhile and rewarding thing to do.
Thinking of the quote by Einstein, who spoke of the future of medicine as being centered around frequency and vibration. And I was thinking about applying that principle if we go back to prayer, much like how sound waves or electromagnetic frequencies can influence physical matter. Prayer works by shifting our mental, emotional, physical states into more harmonious patterns. And I guess that's why people often feel connected or peaceful or rejuvenated after sincere prayer. It's a realignment of our energy field. If we were to accept that frequency plays a role in both healing and personal transformation, how might we cultivate the right frequency in our prayers? Could techniques like breathing, visualization, sound enhance the energy we send out?
Yes, is the simple answer. I was talking earlier about quality, and when quality of spiritual energy, and that really is a way of saying frequency of spiritual energy. So the purer we make ourselves as channels for spiritual energy, the higher the frequency will be. But I think the word pure needs to be explained a bit, because the ultimate way of describing purity is the selfless love in our hearts. It's not about all kinds of austerities and denying ourselves things necessarily. There may be times when we should do things like that. But I think it's far more than that. The love in your heart is far more important than anything, really. And so the question is, how do we cultivate that love, thereby raise the frequency of the energy? And there are many ways, and you mentioned some of them. Deep breathing, yes. Correct yoga breathing, if done regularly, will definitely enable us to achieve a higher frequency of spiritual energy. Mantra, you mentioned sound. Mantra, in the strict sense, is a sound system where the sound itself changes vibration. So mantras are very holy things and should be treated very carefully with utmost reverence, and certainly never misused, of course. But when they're used correctly, when you've been correctly initiated into them, when you get the sound right, this will raise your vibration.
I see prayer as aligning with a higher frequency. In your view, do you think that words are as important as the emotional or energetic state that we
No.
maintain during prayer?
I think the simplest way of answering this is the words are there to help us to generate the feeling. If you're saying something that's a very high ideal, a very spiritual concept, it's easier to think it and to feel it. But I don't think a great master who was radiating energy would need probably any words. But then again, there may be exceptions to that. For example, If you're repeating the words of a great master, that gives you some kind of a link to that master. So that could actually help the quality of the prayer too. But basically, I think the simple answer for people below the adept stage anyway is it's the feeling that really matters, and the words can help enhance the feeling.
That's beautiful. How are you doing for time?
I'm fine. We've been going for over an hour.
I feel like we just scratched the surface of things.
Maybe we do another one sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great. I've got a lot of questions. One of the things I've been thinking about was the collective power of prayer within gatherings where prayers are offered for a common cause. I'm thinking about it from an energetic perspective, because the way I see it, it can be seen as a pooling of frequencies and individual vibrations aligning in a unified force. A magnet on its own, all the molecules face different ways. But when you wrap a copper wire around it and put a higher charge through it, or a higher principle, or a higher frequency, they all line up the same way. It's similar to the way that multiple waves in an ocean can combine to form a much larger wave. So I was thinking group prayers creates a resonance so powerful that it amplifies the effect of each individual's energy. If that's the case, what does it mean for us as individuals when we pray? Does our energy become more impactful when synchronized with others?
When people pray together, all other things being equal, that is more powerful than praying alone as individuals. The whole is more than the sum of its parts. Actually, you asked earlier, go back to one of your earlier questions about what's unique about the Aetherius Society. One thing is that principle, of course, applies to everyone, whatever their religious beliefs, that praying together is more potent. But in the Aetherius Society, we actually have something that adds even to that, which is called the higher mental realm link. Because the Aetherius Society exists not just on this plane, but it started on this plane, but it's now on other planes too. Certainly on higher planes, and probably even on certain lower planes too. During each of our services or during Operation Prayer Power, any of our official activities, there is, I have no idea how this works. It's way above my metaphysical understanding. But at some point in all of our services, there is what's called the higher mental realm link, where some kind of metaphysical link is made between us and the Aetherius Society on higher planes. This makes the spiritual power of the activity immensely greater. It's a fascinating area. As I say, I do not properly understand it myself. When I'm wiser in a few lives' time, hopefully I will. But this is a fantastic opportunity that we have to manipulate karma for it. It will manipulate karma for ourselves, of course, but more importantly, for the world as a whole. This is one of the extraordinary things about the Aetherius Society, and it's certainly not in deference to the people in the Aetherius Society who are ordinary people like me. It's in deference to our unique connection with the cosmic hierarchy, with these great beings from other planets. It's done in deference to them, not in deference to us, because anyone can become a member of the Aetherius Society if they've got their heart in the right place and they want to do the greatest good for the world as a whole.
Before we wrap up, one more question. If collective prayer amplifies energy, could this also work in reverse? Could negative collective thought patterns create disruptions in energy fields like emotional or societal dis-ease?
Yeah, actually, it's an interesting thing that as above, so below. That a lot of the things that apply to spirituality can be put into reverse for evil. That's what negative magic is. It's not like a thing in itself, it's a perversion of positive magic, which is for the good of others. This kind of thing is going on all the time, though. If you had, say, a stadium full of angry football fans, that is going to be radiating some quite unpleasant mental energy. But the good thing is that this is good and bad. Our brains are so limited. We use such a small amount of our potential that it means we can't do as much good. But it also means that when we get angry, that we can't do as much harm. Because if we did have great powers of healing and prayer, and we could raise the dead and all sorts of things like that, then if we got in a bad mood, our mental vibrations would end up killing people. So this is one reason why we don't have all these powers. As we evolve, as we demonstrate the self-discipline to control our thoughts and actions, to use our energy for good, then we will develop more and more power because we can use it safely. Is one way of looking at it. But we have to get that discipline first, or else we'll be actually doing a lot of harm to others and to ourselves karmically. And of course, there are people who do go down that path of trying to get powers for evil, and with varying degrees of success. But even if they're successful for perhaps many lives, thousands of years perhaps, successful in inverted commas in negative magic, it can't go on forever, because they may be able to keep karma at bay for a while, but karma will catch up with them sooner or later. It applies to every single thing in creation. And this is one of the strange things about these people, because some of them are extremely accomplished. They have great powers that they use for evil, and they're highly intelligent in the sense of the things that they can do, that maybe the science or the magic that they understand, that they misuse, but they don't get this one point. They know that karma exists, but they don't get this one point that one day it's going to catch up with them. It's quite a fascinating thing, actually, in their psychology. Is it delusion? Is it some kind of a block? Is it a failure to realize truth? Perhaps a bit of all of those things. But either way, the good news is that no evil person can get away with it forever. The karma will come back to them. And looking at it in a more positive way, though, no one is beyond redemption. Because when the karma catches up with them, we shouldn't think of it as punishment. It may manifest in a way that's very difficult for them. They may have to suffer a lot in order to learn the lessons they need. But actually, what this karmic force is doing is giving them the lessons they need to turn them to the light. So they stop doing evil and they see the error of their ways and they move forward. And however bad any intelligence gets, everyone will one day turn to the right path and gain spiritual enlightenment.
That's beautiful. Mark, thank you so much for your valuable insights and for talking about the Aetherius Society and many aspects that you've brought to light about karma, reincarnation, and ascended masters.
Thank you, Peter. It's been a pleasure.
Do you have any parting words, and where can people find you?
Do visit our website, which is aetherius.org. That's aetherius.org. And my own website is markinfo.co.uk. If you have any questions, please do write to me, send me an email, and I'd be happy to answer if I possibly can.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Peter.